bells that moved. IBM promoted its new Selectric typewriter on one hand while showcasing the promise of computers with the other. The Bell Systems exhibit focused on the history of telecommunications and on its new touch-tone phones.
They had the push-button phone. I remember that.
Yeah.
I'd never seen a push-button phone before. And when we were waiting for the tram to take us back to our hotel, they had 3 or 4 phone booths, and they all had push-button phones in them. And I thought it was a toy phone because real phones couldn't have buttons on them. And I went over and I was just playing on the phone. That was probably one of the most fun things that I had to do because I could play with it rather than just sit there and watch it. And now, I mean, nobody's ever heard of rotary phones.
Video phones, too, were displayed and promoted as something that everyone would have by 1970.
We talk, and that was the first time we were able to use a telephone without using a handheld, receiver and transmitter on it. You can just sit there in the booth and you can talk just like we are now, and which was really nice. And we called her sister in New Jersey.
Another sister
in New Jersey.
Told her we were on television and we could see what they were doing.
And she believed us.
Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors spent $110 million to build their showcases and lure visitors to the latest models. Ford unveiled the signature car of the mid-1960s, the Mustang.
The Ford Pavilion had different cars. We were 12 and 13 years old and very into cars. That was a big thing then. We would wait online for our favorite car, and even though you might have to wait an hour to get into the pavilion, we'd be willing to wait another half hour to get the right car to drive in, because we wouldn't take anything but a Mustang.
General Motors sought to repeat its 1939 Futurama with Futurama 2.
The GM Futurama exhibit, which of course was modeled on the 1939 Futurama, was the hit of the 1939 fair, and which today everybody always cites as being very insightful and predicting all sorts of developments over the next 50 years. General Motors decided to come back with Futurama 2 and project ahead again.
3/4 of our Earth lies beneath the cold, still deeps of the sea, a water world in which we now can find abundance far beyond our dreams. Now we can farm and harvest a drifting, swimming, never-ending nourishment, food enough to feed 7 times the population of the Earth. In aquacopters, search the ocean floor to find miles deep, vast fields of precious minerals and ores. And in the deepest trenches of the seas, study at first hand long-hidden secrets of survival. Work easily the rich oil deposits of the continental shelves, while trains of submarines transport materials and goods along the waterways of the undersea. And in warmer seas are new realms of pleasure. A weekend, if you wish, at Hotel Atlantis in the Kingdom of the Sea. A holiday of thrills and of adventure, of radiant wonders in the sun-bright gardens of the sea.
A very nice young man called in and wished to make a hotel reservation in the underwater hotel, which was demonstrated in the Futurama exhibit.
In some ways, it's personified by their jungle road builder, which was a giant machine that could go foraging through jungles and forests, chopping down trees and leaving a road in its path. Today, these sort of things are very easy targets for a more ecologically minded age. That was a flaw in a lot of the technology that was put forth in '64.
General Electric and Pepsi-Cola, among others, enlisted Walt Disney to populate their exhibits with artificial people or audio animatronic figures to deliver marketing messages. Disney used the fair as a test bed for new technology and attractions for his planned theme park in Florida. Pepsi produced It's a Small World, starring little animatrons singing and dancing songs of peace in a global festival of love.
Maybe because I was a kid, but that was just the best ride. I must have gone on that 6 times, and we got the record, and I would sing along with it, and it got to the point where I could just sing it in every single different language. Those little dolls were so cute, and I loved that ride. I thought that was great.
The companies gave away brochures and trinkets aplenty to promote their products. Tiny Heinz pickles, for one, became a popular though easily misplaced item. Souvenirs could be found in an abundance. Ride the monorail. The box that served as a seat became an instant souvenir. Balloons, T-shirts, model cars, and many other tacky but hardly trendy artifacts became objects of desire among fairgoers. Who wouldn't want to buy a hat with a feather in it to parade around the fairground? Even though fair officials complained about the poor attendance, fairgoers thought the lines were too long for the more popular attractions. But even in the heat of the summer, waiting to see the future or to ride in a Ford Mustang was worth it. Lines did have benefits for a chosen few.
It was in August of '64, and 2 neighbors and I went to the fair, and we ended up in the Clairol exhibit. And coming out of the exhibit, there was a photographer with a camera tripod, and he stopped me and asked me if I would be interested in doing some more pictures if these that he was taking turned out. He said, chances are you'll never hear from me again because we're taking hundreds of pictures. So I proceeded to forget about it and went home, and a couple of months later we got a letter in the mail asking if I would come down to their office on Fifth Avenue and talk to them about a film. Their interest was in hair coloring and loving care product, Cover the Gray, which I had quite a bit of.
Art might have been third on the list of things to see at the fair, but great and interesting works could be found everywhere. But it was Michelangelo's Pietà that buried the competition.
I remember I had this marvelous experience. There was a photographer inside. It was sealed up. You couldn't get in, nobody. And while I was hanging the piece up, this photographer says, "You want to come in and really have a good look at it?" Up to 1960, I had painted. I'd never made any sculpture. Occasional fooling around, but I really wasn't into it. And by now, when he said, "Go in and touch that Michelangelo," it was like touching an icon, you know, more than the greatness of the work itself. And it was a very thrilling experience.
Just outside the fairgrounds at Shea Stadium, Casey Stengel and the amazing New York Mets showcased their brand of art and entertainment. There was no better sideshow to the grand doings in Flushing Meadow.
My mother would give me a couple of bucks. I think the entry fee was $1 at that time. Every now and then when I wanted a Belgian waffle, you know, when those Belgian waffles kind of like were melting in my mouth, I'd pocket the extra buck and I'd take my bike and I'd ride it down on the side of the Grand Central Parkway, and then I'd hop over the fence. And that way I'd have an extra buck for the Belgian waffle in the middle of the day, you know, so I'd pocket the extra buck.
Nations and corporations spent tens of millions of dollars to showcase their products and culture, often going to elaborate extremes to entice fairgoers. But the lasting collective memory of the fair seemed to be based on the simplest of foods, a waffle, a gloriously delicious Belgian waffle.
I don't think anything topped the Belgium exhibit and the Belgian waffles, because I don't think anyone could go a day without going over and eating at least one, or maybe if you could eat two, because they were huge. They were great.
They were so huge at the time that, you know, we'd
The
split
reason
it.
why we could remember, my mother bought them for us.
It was the first time I ever had a Belgian waffle, and my wife said the same thing when she went to the World's Fair. She said it was the first time she had a Belgian waffle. Talk about small town, you know, New England kind of diet.
I have been trying to replicate that taste now for the 30-plus years it's been since I was at the fair. I've tried Belgian waffles in different countries all around the United States, and that is a memory that I've not been able to replicate, that I believe I should be able to, because it seems like such a simple request. But that was an incredible taste. It was exactly $1, I remember it well, and never a day went that we didn't have a Belgian waffle at the fair.
The New York World's Fair opens for its second and final season under sunny skies and a better crowd than marked last year's opening. There are 168 pavilions for visitors to see, many of them enlarged and refurbished after a long winter's sleep. A visitor with the time and money has 646 acres to roam, and such a roam can't be completed in a day.
Fair attendance never came close to the anticipated 70 million in paid admissions. Things got so bad in the spring of 1965 that Robert Moses called on the U.S. Weather Bureau to put a more positive spin on its forecasts. The Weather Bureau at first refused, then complied with the request by focusing on the sunny rather than the cloudy part in its forecasts. As the fair approached the end of its 2 years in Flushing Meadow, however, something changed. People started to come in huge numbers. Daily attendance doubled as the fair's end in October loomed on the calendar.
One of the phenomenal things that happened was that as the fair came to a close, there was just this incredible burst of attendance. I think something like 10 million people attended the fair during that last month or two.
When I was 12 years old, I went to St. Pancras School in Glendale, and I was in the boys' choir. And the closing day of the fair, we sang at the Vatican Pavilion, and that was like the end of the fair, and it was like a really big to-do. And when it was all over, I remember looking around and thinking, wow, this is it, it's all over. You know, 2 years of going to the fair and seeing all this stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, my parents were there, and it was incredibly crowded. And they're like, oh, come on, you know, it's time to go, let's get out of here, there's too many people. And like, I just wanted to stay and just like look at it one last time. It was really cool. I had a lot of fun there.
On October 16, 1965, Westinghouse buried its time capsule to commemorate the fair. The cylinder included a Beatles record, a bikini, Polaroid camera, electric toothbrush, transistor radio, credit cards, birth control pills, and dozens of other items. Westinghouse announced that it would be open in the year 6939.
As it was getting near the close of the fair, we had heard from the administrator's office that there would be a time capsule, and we were each to put our name in it. And so that was a big thing. That was the last thing that we did as a group, having worked at the fair. And it was a wonderful, happy experience.
On October 17, 1965, the final day of the fair, 450,000 people swept through the gates. It was so crowded that people could barely move. People began to take pieces of the fair, including flowers. At 2 a.m. on October 18, 1965, the fair closed its gates. Almost 52 million attended the fair during its 2-year run.
I was really sad. I really was sad. And years later, I went back. I had a job working at the World's Fair, renting bicycles, and they had concerts there, and I worked there. But I was really sad. It was a big part of my life. And that was it, too. You know, it felt like it was a part of me. And that was one of the neat feelings, you know. I had something to do with it, just being a New Yorker.
Even on the last day and after the last day, when they started taking all the buildings down, it just seemed incredible to me that all of the energy and all of the enjoyment that the people that had been through the fair for those years, they were just taking it all down and making a park out of it. I just wanted them to keep the buildings there and make it into a park that we could go to for like years.
It was such a significant part of our lives for those 2 years. And it was the thing to do. It's what young kids did who lived as close as I did to the fair. I was only a mile away. So it was like going to the park. So it was losing part of our lives when the fair went away. It was very sad for all of us.
In later years, my buddy and I, we used to go bike riding. I would ride from where I lived in Queens, even when I was in my 20s and 30s, and we would bike down Yellowstone Boulevard and do a couple circuits around the lake there and then go through the park itself. And even at that point, I would ride through the streets there, and I could remember where all the pavilions are, even though it was just grass now. You know, I'd say, oh yeah, that's where Bell Telephone was, and that's where the IBM pavilion was, and that's where the GM building was. I used to love just riding around there and reminiscing as I rode around on my bike.
The 1964 New York World's Fair was the last of the 20th century World's Fairs to take place in one of America's great old cities. It was also the last fair organized by people who saw America's big cities as a perfectly natural place to hold a fair. Scholars may debate the 64 fair's merits and place as a point marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. This fair defies such lofty examination. It was really about fun, about being young and free, just enough allowance money to buy a Belgian waffle.